Welcome to Blue Talks.
Hello everyone, it is wonderful to be here at the University of Alberta today. Thank you for joining me. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own life? Like you are boxed in by this identity you have created or allowed others to create for you. We think we have it all figured out when we're 18 years old. At least I did. My plan was go to university, get a great job, meet the man of my dreams, get married, buy a house, have 2 to 4 children, travel, and spend lots of time with friends and family. Well, life didn't exactly work out that way for me. A few years ago, I started to feel like a stranger in my life. I realized that my life hadn't actually changed all that much. What changed was me. I started asking myself different questions and going through my own personal growth journey. And what I found was I started to uncover who I was. And as I moved into my 40s, I started to rewrite my plan. I was ready to change. A big part of who I am is we have a family cottage. It's in Quebec. It's been in my family for over 70 years. My dad grew up going there with his siblings. My mom and dad would pack me and my siblings up and drive us across the country to go and spend time there with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and cousins. And now I've watched the next generation, my nieces and nephews, go there and experience and have just, it's become this sacred place for us. And a few years ago, we were out there, and my sister-in-law and older niece, they went out for a walk, and they come back, and they're all excited. They found a cliff jumping spot. How we never knew about this in all our years there, I don't know. Well, I didn't want to cliff jump. I had no desire to do that. However, I went along. We got in the boat, we drove out of the bay around the bend, and we found the spot. I didn't get out of the boat. I was like, my 4-year-old niece, she needs me to stay in the boat with her. Everyone else got out. They were cliff jumping. I took the videos. I cheered them on. We got back in the boat and we went back to the cottage. The next summer, same thing. Cliff jumping day. We all get in the boat. We go out of the bay around the bend and we find the spot. I still didn't want to go. I had no desire. I was like, I'm afraid of heights. I have no desire to do this. Why would I put myself in that situation? Well, this time I get home, a couple months later, things start shifting for me. I start going through this new journey and new discovery of myself. And I think about the cliffs. I don't know why they stayed in my mind. And I decided next year I am going to jump. Well, it's really easy to make that decision 10 months before you go. Chances are I would have decided to not go. So I took matters into my own hands and I talked to my nieces and nephew and I told them I am going to jump next year. And they were so excited. Auntie Shelby is jumping. The next summer comes around. We're at the cottage. It had been a really difficult 10 months for me. A lot of my own identity had changed. I went through a separation after a 16-year marriage. And as I was there, I was really letting myself sit in the space and hoping they would forget that I wanted to cliff jump. They didn't. So the cliff jumping day came and I decided I'm going to journal. My now 6-year-old niece, she decides that she is going to cliff jump. Well, she's a little bit young still to cliff jump. Somehow she convinces my brother to carry her while he cliff jumps. She's very excited that it's both of our first cliff jumping day. We sit on the couch before we go, I wanted to capture what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And she did too. So she joins me and we write our things. I ask her, do you want to share with me what you wrote? So she shows me her journal. It says, I am going cliff jumping. I am scared. I am going to be amazing. And I thought that it was such a beautiful way at looking at something you're afraid of. You can be scared and you can know you're going to do amazing. We get in the boat, we drive out of the bay, around the bend, and we find the spot. This time, I take off my life jacket, I get out of the boat, I have my water shoes on, I climb up the cliff. I stand there quite a ways. This is over there, I was back here. My nephew goes, my older niece goes, my sister-in-law goes, my brother goes by himself. I walk up to the edge, and I am absolutely gripped by fear. The fear of heights is coming back. The fear of facing everything in my life is coming forward. And I freeze, and I just can't do it. I just can't do it, and I slowly step away. My nephew goes, my older niece goes, my sister-in-law goes, my brother goes. And I'm like, okay, Shelby, you want this. Shelby, this is something that you've chosen to do. Why do you keep avoiding this? Walk up to the edge. And I knew if I was being honest with myself, it was more than just the cliff jumping itself. I was emotionally jumping. And I start to cry. And I start to feel everything that had happened, everything that had built up to that moment. And then the voices start, who do you think you are? Why are you doing this? Why even bother? And then I look out, my sister-in-law and niece and nephew, they were out on the treading water, so I was making them wait a long time. And my brother was back up with my little niece ready to go. And I look at those three little faces and I think about all of the time I've invested in them, all of the things I've invested in myself. And I think about when they're 41 years old and they're facing something that they're scared of, what do I want them to do? I want them to remember Auntie Shelby cried and then she jumped. I also thought about, where am I going to be in a year? If I don't jump, where am I going to be 1 year from now? I am going to be in the exact same place. I am going to be facing the exact same things. And I didn't want that. So I step to the edge. I muster every ounce of courage I possibly can. I take a deep breath and I look at the horizon and I jump. As I'm floating through the air, I feel incredibly supported and incredibly safe. I hear all the cheers around me, and then I hit the water and it's silent for a couple seconds, and all I can think is I did it. I did it. And I come out of the water and cheers and hoots and hollers, and I felt like a little bit of a celebrity in that moment. I go once more for good measure, just to make sure that I actually did it. We get back in the boat, we head back to the cottage. My body is vibrating. We talked about energy earlier. My body has energy flowing through it. And all I could do when I got back there was lay on the dock for about half an hour, just sitting in it, sitting in what I did and what that felt like. It's really hard to face our fears. It's really hard to face parts of ourselves we've either buried or never uncovered. And sometimes we have to shift our identity a little bit as we go through those moments. About 8 years ago, I had a really big identity shift. I had been in a 13-year corporate HR career, and it ended up that I was part of a mass layoff. And if I was honest with myself, I wanted that to happen. It was this beautiful gift that was given to me, and I could do anything. I didn't know that I wanted to go into the image consulting business, but at the time, as I consulted with a lot of friends, how they saw me was someone who I used style to communicate something. I helped others use style to communicate something. And I made the decision that that's what I was going to do. When we wear something that feels like us, we show up differently. And yet, where do we learn that? If we have someone in our life, that's amazing. If you don't, where do you learn that? And therefore, I started my business. And one of my favorite parts of my business is when people look in the mirror and they stand a little taller. I didn't think I could be a business owner. That was a huge identity shift for me to do that. Around that same time, I started to become very intentional about my own personal development, looking at that identity. Who am I? I started asking myself a lot of questions. And as I answered these questions, I got to know a little bit more about myself. And there's 5 that I am going to share with you today. And I actually shared all of them in the cliff jumping story. And my hope is that these questions will help you change your life as well. Question number 1. What do you want? We heard this question earlier today. A friend asked me this question a couple of years ago. My first reaction was, I can't want. I realized I had a belief that I should be happy with everything I have. I shouldn't want more. I shouldn't want extra. I need to be satisfied with what I have. One of the questions I always ask my clients is, why do you want to work with me? It's fascinating what answers I get. I get, well, I hate shopping and I want help shopping. Another one is, I hate everything in my closet and I don't even know who I am anymore. I need help. Another is, I had a baby and I don't know myself anymore. Or I went through a relationship change. Or I went through a career change. Or I retired. And you feel like you're not yourself anymore. What they really want, all of these individuals, what they really want is to increase their confidence. They want to feel better about who they are, and clothing is just a tool for that. My first iteration answering this question was kind of terrible. It was very generic, world peace, health. And I realized that as I set myself aside, that's one thing I recognized, that I had to set all of these ideas and my identity that I made up. And I had to just really think in my gut, what do I want? I went through a second iteration, third, fourth, and every single time it became a little bit clearer and a little bit deeper. And I was amazed at where I ended up. In the cliff jumping story, I didn't want to jump necessarily. I mean, maybe. I always thought it might be fun. But I didn't necessarily want to jump. What I wanted was what jumping represented, what it did for me internally and emotionally. Now, to become a little bit more clear on what I want is question number 2. So question number 2 is, what are you avoiding? This is a tricky question because it seems relatively simple. What are you avoiding? And yet, as you sit with it, it sneaks up on you. And you're like, oh, I'm avoiding all of these things. So often in what we're avoiding is actually what we want. Where our fear is what we want. In the cliff jumping, I was avoiding it because it was scary. It was unknown. I had a gripping fear of heights. I was one time at the Eiffel Tower, or not the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and I was like up against the middle because I was like, it's too far down there. It was gripping fear. It's really scary to do that. I actually ask myself this question weekly now because it's a really good indication of what I should be doing. I don't always do it, I will admit. However, I'm more conscious of it than I used to be. To take these 2 questions a little bit deeper, we get to question number 3. Are you being honest with yourself? A few years into our marriage, my spouse started going through a really difficult time internally, dealing with some mental health issues. And it became really difficult for us. And one of the questions he asked Not of me. He was more asking of the world in general. I happened to be there. Why can't people be honest with themselves? Why can't they look in the mirror and be honest with themselves? At that time, I felt like I was being honest with myself. Now looking back, I can see there was things I didn't know yet. And that question stuck with me. Over the next decade, it stuck with me. And it made me wonder, like, what am I being honest with myself in this? Why am I avoiding this? Am I being honest that I'm avoiding this? In the cliff jumping story, for the 2 years before, I wasn't being honest with myself. I will tell you, there was something in me that wanted to do that, wanted to face it, and yet I was not being honest with myself as to what that was. In my niece's journal, if you remember that, she said, I am scared and I'm going to do amazing. She was honest with herself. We can have both. We can feel both of those things at the same time. Question number 4. What are you investing in? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about your time, your attention, your focus, your energy, what you do, the people that are around you. What are you investing in? I'm going to talk specifically about attention. One thing I always ask my clients is, what do you love about yourself and what do you struggle with? And physically, because I am talking about clothing. And it breaks my heart because usually the what you struggle with is the longer list. And I had this client, she came in from out of town, so I was working with her back-to-back days. First day, we do my style foundations, and I ask her, what do you struggle with? She said, my stomach. And then I asked her, what do you love about yourself? She's like, I really like my arms. And I said to her, there's this term, you may have heard it before, where our attention goes, energy flows. I challenged her to, next time she looks in the mirror, to look at her arms. Start telling herself, I got amazing arms. Check out these arms. They're so strong. They look amazing. And see what happens. Just notice what happens. The next day, we get together and she comes to me, she's like, Shelby, I did it. I'm like, you did what? She said, I looked at my arms and I gave them some attention. I'm like, awesome. She's like, I woke up this morning and I felt like I lost 20 pounds. And it's that emotional, that energetic weight that she was starting to lift off because she was putting positive energy into herself and focusing on herself. Where our attention goes, energy flows. What are you investing in? Where is your attention going? What are you thinking about? What are the thoughts in your mind? And I was telling I was thinking at the top of the cliff jumping, my nieces and nephews, I invested in them. I was investing in them. I was investing in myself. What are you investing in? Question number 5. Where are you going to be in a year? When I was, a few years ago, before I left the corporate world, I found myself in this holding pattern. I kept thinking, next year it'll be different. Next year, I'm going to have children. Next year, I'm going to travel. Next year, I'm going to feel better, whatever that was. And it never happened. And I started getting frustrated because I would think, okay, a year from now, where am I going to be a year from now? But the reason why nothing changed was because I wasn't changing. And as soon as I started changing, things started changing around me, my life circumstances. And it's about a change of mindset. It's not about just setting a goal and hoping it's going to happen. You have to think about your habits. What are the things that you're doing today? Where is your attention? What are you investing in? Are you being honest with yourself? What are you avoiding? What do you want? And as you start making those shifts in your daily life, you're going to be able to get to where you want. So if nothing changes right now, where are you going to be in a year? And are you the person who achieves it? If you're ready to change your life, answer these 5 questions. What do you want? What are you avoiding? Are you being honest with yourself? What are you investing in? And where are you going to be in a year? It's not easy. I will tell you it's not easy. You are going to start recognizing parts of yourself that you may have not even realized are there, that you've buried so deep that you couldn't even see them. Are you ready to stop being a stranger in your own life? Are you ready to allow yourself to change? We do need to give that permission to ourselves. I'm going to leave you with a quote. It's actually my own quote that I like to say often. When I face myself at the end of my life, I am going to say, I did what I was put on this earth at this time to do, and I did it with all of me. Thank you.